Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today is Monday, April 13th. Lucky number 13. Hopefully everybody out there enjoyed a beautiful Easter weekend, if you're into celebrating that sort of thing. If not, hopefully you enjoyed just a lovely weekend in the month of April, wherever you're listening out there. But I appreciate you tuning in here today, and we got an excellent show lined up for you once again here with the GSMC Baseball Podcast. The first couple of segments, we got two new reports that came out within the past couple of days since last Thursday when I spoke to you guys previously about potential solutions for getting Major League Baseball back out there to play as soon as possible. We're going to run through those and give you my thoughts on what could be those outcomes here coming up in the month of May, June, or July. Transitioning into segments 3 and 4, we are going to continue with our awards ceremony. And today is the Manager of the Year, talking about the NL and AL Manager of the Years. Going to be discussing who the favorites are, some outside-of-the-box candidates, talk about different discussions who I think may steal those awards typically, because it's not the same names year over year. So somebody you're not thinking of right now is going to come out and win that award. And then wrapping up today's episode, I'm going to continue to go through a few of the simulations. I know we talked about Strat-O-Matic in the past. Well, Baseball Reference is doing a simulation of their own, and I want to compare and contrast the differences to see if, one likes one team more than the other here early on, as we're a couple of weeks in now to these simulations. And then finally, in the sixth segment, I've touched on a couple of times previously about how I think the home run derby could be involved moving forward with Major League Baseball. One, to limit extra innings after 12 innings, go to a swing off. And two, since recording this here Sunday night, the horse competition that the NBA is putting on ESPN. Now, yes, it wasn't the best entertainment, but certainly live sports, live entertainment. I had it on in my, at my home on my television. So if the MLB can work some sort of home run derby, I'm going to talk to you guys about who I think would represent every team in the league. And then moving forward, I'm going to try to put together a little bit of a bracket and give you guys a simulation on who I think would move on and advance within that. But great show, jumping right into it right now. The first report coming out there, and the more outlandish of the two reports, this one from Tim Kirkchin at ESPN. He dropped this little nugget in passing, and it's picked up some steam here online. But Tim talked about how he was communicating with one of his sources within the league, one of their representatives, and he talks about how they could possibly play Major League Baseball this year in Japan, how they could not even play in the United States because Japan on the COVID-19 curve looks to be ahead of where the United States is as a whole, and possibly not as affected as the U.S. is coming off. And this is because the professional league over there in Japan, it was hoping to come back actually in 2 weeks here in late April, but it's since been pushed back into the month of May. Now it looks like the end of May, early June, but that's still going to be before I think the opening comes here stateside. So if you're looking at that from a professional level, saying, okay, their professional league has been doing it and doing it successfully now for the entire month of June, why don't we just go over there, use the same facilities, use the same process that they were using, and be able to put on Major League Baseball because we know what they're doing is being effective. They're almost the test dummies for Major League Baseball in that right. And what could happen is locally they could play the Japanese games or Japan games at night during prime time and then put the Major League Baseball in the morning local time, and wherever that may be stateside when it comes to TVs, maybe they run it on replay. I don't know how many people are getting up when to watch live games, but it could mess with the hours, and people are going, you can't do that. It's, USA, Major League Baseball, you got to do that. Well, when you look into some of the logistics involved, and, one of the past proposals we've discussed here on the show talked about quarantining the players themselves in the state of Arizona near a spring training facility or near the city of Phoenix. And some of the pushback from the players was no visits from their family, no visits from their wives. Locally, some of the Phillies guys, they talked about how their wives and them are expecting babies during that time, and for him not to be at the birth of his or his child, is a no-go. That was Zach Wheeler who came out with that discussion. It was basically like, I need to be there. That's gonna, not fly with me if we can't see them, or, vice versa. So, the question I'm asking is, if you're a family member of a player or a wife of a player, would you rather them be in Arizona and you not be able to see them in person for the next 90, 120 days, 3-4 months, whatever it may be? Or would you rather be in Japan and be able to join them in person? Yes, you'd be in Japan. You wouldn't speak the language of the country. You would certainly be the minority over there. It's an unknown continent, country, economy. Who knows with everything going on with COVID-19. But you would be able to be there with your family or your spouse. And, thinking if I was a player, what would my wife do, or what would I want if those were the two options? And I would probably much rather go to Japan and have my wife with me or my family with me than go to Arizona and have to FaceTime and be in quarantine, 24/7 and not be able to see them for 90, 120 days, whatever it is, getting tested during all of those times. So as you continue to break it down, it may not be that outlandish of a logistical idea. Obviously, having Major League Baseball, which is a U.S. sport, I guess Canada's a North American sport, really. Well, they opened up 2019 in Japan last year, so they have interaction with the government in years past. They have experience with performing over there in that country and relating, the hotels they could stay at, how long they'd have to be there. Obviously, there would be much, much more involved with 30 teams now entering into their economy and trying to figure out how they're going to be involved with local law enforcement, all of the above. But if you're sitting here as Major League Baseball and it gets into the month of May, the month of June, and you're looking around going, okay, how do we know if this is going to work or not? Well, let's take a look at what the Japanese professionals have been doing. Why wouldn't you want to do the exact same thing if it's worked to this point? I don't think it would be a numbers game where, oh yeah, it only works with the 10, 15, 20 teams that they have over there in the Japanese league. But if we add 30 teams with personnel, players, coaches, all of the above from the U.S., it no longer has the capacity or capability to run clean or without interruption from the coronavirus or COVID-19. So as crazy as it sounds, it really does. It could be the quickest option logistically. I'm not going to say it's the best option logistically, but I'll say it could be the quickest option for Major League Baseball to get back on the field. And that's to not even play here in the U.S. As the numbers continue to come out there with the coronavirus, the U.S. now over 500,000, 560,000 plus, with just about 190,000 of that coming in New York, and I believe New York City specifically. is now over 100,000 cases. New Jersey, second on the list, and a lot of those New Jersey cases originate in Manhattan, originate in New York. So almost half of the United States cases coming from greater New York City. Then it drops down to Michigan, California, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Florida, Louisiana, a lot of the hot spots that are coming up here. But if the curve isn't flattening, or at least on the decrease another month from now, and professional baseball is being played elsewhere live, the Major League Baseball is going to think long and hard about trying to get involved with that and trying to get back on the field so they can get those TV rights running as soon as possible. But let me know your thoughts out there on possibly playing in China. I don't know how many different facilities they need, how the timing would work, a ton of questions. But hit us up on Twitter, GSMC Baseball. You can find us out there. We've been picking up our activity on the social media here recently, wanting to engage with everybody out there. But that wraps up the first segment here, talking about possibly having Major League Baseball in Japan. We're going to pause now for a brief word from one of our sister shows here within the network. But when we come back on segment 2, we're going to be talking about the more realistic report that came out a few days back, talking about using spring training as more of a realistic option come the regular season. So stick with us here for just a second. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Kevin Mahalik. We'll talk to you soon.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, I appreciate you listening today, Monday, April 13th. This episode's being released. I believe it is episode 179 here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, an episode 12 already for myself. Maybe not, maybe 10. I've been on it here a few weeks now, coming up on a month with everybody listening out there. I appreciate all the positive feedback we've been getting across the multiple different channels. And before we get too far, before I forget, I wanted to do this off the top of the episode, but like I talked about on Thursday's show, if we get a review, certainly want to give a shout out on the podcast here. Last week it was from Bridge Lynn. This week it is from Pitt, P-I-T-T number 1, entitled Mahalik Review, 5 stars. As a Yinzer, and for those of you that don't know, again, I'm from outside of Philadelphia, but, have some family in the greater Pittsburgh area. Maybe this is one of those individuals. A Yinzer is somebody who is local to the city of Pittsburgh. Quote, as a Yinzer, I really appreciate Kevin's knowledge of the game and his later segments, which are fun and entertaining. Very easy listen, yet informative. Love his take on the food at PNC Park. Great pickup, GSMC, exclamation part. So, yeah, they enjoyed that PNC Park. I had it at the top of the list for ballparks. I had some food involved that I wanted to check out there at PNC, so they showed up more than once. So, shout out to Pitt fan number 1, who left a 5-star review and a positive feedback for myself as the host. So I appreciate everybody listening out there. If you want to leave a review, 1 star, 5 stars, whatever it may be, I'll read it on the podcast here. We'll get it involved. And in the first segment, I talked about Major League Baseball, how they talked about potentially having a season this year in Japan. Well, that's been shot down pretty quickly, and people think it is quite outrageous to talk about, I being one of them. But one of the other reports that came out, this one I believe, from Bob Nightingale out of USA Today. And Bob's tuned in, certainly, with Major League Baseball. He's one of the guys on Twitter who, when he tweets something out, it typically is true and not just rumors, whether it's Bryce Harper to the Phillies or, whatever. We're following. Bob's one of the guys that you have an alert set up for to know when he tweets, so you can be the first one to find out. And he basically states that they're looking to eliminate the traditional American and National Leagues for 2020. And if this were the case, they would literally go with the spring training format of Arizona and Florida leagues, because it really is half and half, split right down the middle, with teams that are in Arizona, 15 of them, and then 15 in Florida. And then based on your locations within the state of spring training, they would group together the 5 closest locations. So logistically, it would be the least amount of travel, the least amount of logistics and everything to work out. No flying, all busing, everything along those lines. But if that's the case, I wanted to run through some of these divisions just very quickly here throughout this segment to see if there would be any changes to potential playoffs or playoff matchups, AL, NL style, since it would all be jumbled together and that wouldn't matter. There'd be no interleague play, no crossover. Starting in Florida, they would break down to 3 divisions. The North, the South, and the East is how things are going to go in Florida. First off, in the North, you would have the Philadelphia Phillies, the New York Yankees, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Detroit Tigers, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And, they wouldn't be known as that. They'd be known as the Clearwater Phillies, the Tampa Yankees, and so on. But New York Yankees obviously would roll in this division. The Phillies aren't there yet, but I do think the Phillies would see themselves in second place as opposed to the NL East, where I have them either third or fourth, depending on how things break down, as well as the Tigers and Pirates are 2 of the worst teams in baseball. So from a Phillies perspective, I think this would improve their record. The Yankees obviously still taking the division, and then the Blue Jays most likely in a little bit of a distant third. Going to the South, Atlanta Braves, Boston Red Sox, Minnesota Twins, Tampa Bay Rays, and Baltimore Orioles. And that is a tough division. Atlanta's very good. Minnesota's very good. Tampa Bay is very good. Baltimore, very much at the bottom. The Red Sox want to be good. I don't think are very good, but certainly an entertaining bunch there. And that would be outstanding to see Braves, Twins, and Rays, whether they beat up on each other or beat up on the Red Sox and Orioles, to where those are your 2 wild card teams, leaving the Phillies out of it. And then in the East, you go Astros, Cardinals, Mets, Marlins, Nationals. Oh, man, that's good stuff. The Houston Astros, I think, would win that division. Nationals are good. The Cardinals are good. So when you break it down, I'm going Yankees. Oh, man, Braves over the Twins, I would think, over Tampa. Wow, that's a tough one. Let's go Yankees, Braves, Astros. And then I got the 2 wild cards as the Twins and the Rays. That means your Cardinals are out, your Nationals are out, and your Phillies are out. Ultimately, then we got the Yankees and the Twins, the Braves and the Astros. I think the Astros beat the Braves. Yankees, Astros, Yankees coming out of Florida, just because I think the Yankees are really one of the top teams in baseball. But, wow, a playoff series not across the board between the Braves and the Astros would be fantastic. Twins and Rays, Twins and Yankees, Rays, Yankees, Phillies, Twins. Ooh, that would be good stuff coming out of Florida. I'm getting very entertained, just thinking about that possibility here as we're rolling Florida and Arizona leagues. So let's jump over to Arizona, since that would be the, ALNL. Let's go to Arizona. They're going northeast, west, northwest out in Arizona. So a little more complicated, but Northeast Division, we got the Cubs, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, and the Athletics. Ooh, the Rockies and Giants, not great. Diamondbacks kind of middle fiddle. Athletics right above that. The Cubbies, people think they're going to be better than they are, in my opinion. So I think the Oakland A's would win that division, with the Cubs coming in second, potentially flirting with a wild card. So that would give Oakland a win in the division, and potentially not where they're at right now behind Houston. I think Houston wins that one straight up. So in this new case, Oakland gets a division title and a trip to the playoffs, not having to deal with that wild card matchup. Then we go to the West in Arizona. Dodgers, Angels, White Sox, Reds, Indians. Ooh, man, that's a good one too. The Dodgers cut above. They win that division. But the Indians, Angels, White Sox, and Reds, I had each and every one of them in that wild card mix, over 500 mix. I think the White Sox could shake it up a little bit this year. I had the White Sox as my surprise team in the AL. The Reds as my surprise team in the NL. They're both now in the same division. The Angels made a lot of additions trying to get healthy, and Cleveland, is still very good. So that would be a very solid West and an excellent battle for the wild card spot. And then rounding out the Northwest for the Arizona League would be the Brewers, Padres, Mariners, Rangers, Royals. That's your weakest division. Milwaukee would win that one in my opinion. The Padres second, the Mariners, Rangers, and Royals all kind of coming behind them. So I would think, honestly, I would go Athletics Northeast, Dodgers West, Brewers Northwest with your wild card, a combination of Cubs, Angels, White Sox, Reds, Indians. I'll go Angels, Reds, and then you're going to get, let's see, Reds, Dodgers. Dodgers win that one. Brewers, Athletics. Let's go Brewers, Dodgers. Dodgers get it, and we still have Dodgers, Yankees, ultimately, for the World Series and the prize there. But, man, just fascinating to think about some of these divisions. Like I talked about, Astros, Cardinals, Nationals in one division, Braves, Twins, Rays in one division, Yankees, Phillies. Oh, goodness gracious. That could be a lot of fun if they want to go that route as Major League Baseball, and they basically decide, hey, spring training facilities are our best bet to keep everybody healthy and to keep everything as clean as possible. Florida and Arizona are both equally as safe. Let's have one league operate in one spot, one league operate in another, just due to not having 30 in one spot. Numbers, the less number, the better. Typically, they would be a little bit more spread out if they had two leagues instead of one location, but that could be fun. And 2020 is already going to be known as a season with an asterisk, one of the craziest seasons that there's ever been. So the likes of possibly playing in Japan, possibly blowing up the AL/NL, and just doing Florida and Arizona. As we continue on here day by day, week by week, the crazy outlandish thoughts we used to have don't seem that crazy or outlandish any longer. But that wraps up the second segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows here within the network. But coming back, segments 3 and 4, I'm talking about AL and NL Managers of the Year. Let's round out award season. Hang with us, everybody.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back once again to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. Today is Monday, April 13th, coming off an Easter weekend here. Hopefully everybody out there is staying home and staying safe. I know this holiday weekend was a little bit different for everybody out there. My wife and I still made a nice lunch/dinner even though it was just me, her, and our 2-year-old running around at home to cook for. Usually we get together with my aunt, uncle, my cousins, parents, brother, sister-in-law. Quite a few, people gather for the holiday, but obviously we did it virtually this year. We had a Zoom virtual meeting that we put together for an hour and a half, 2 hours, played some games, tried to keep it light, tried to keep it entertaining. We're doing whatever we can, to get through this time and to stay safe, stay home, help out everybody else by staying home. Everybody out there, all the healthcare workers, doctors, everyone on the front line, continuing to put their lives on the line as we trudge forward here. Second week of April, quarantine. I don't know how many days you're on out there. My wife's counting somewhere around here. I don't know the exact number, but we're in the 20s, if not the 30s. Coming up, it's probably closer to the 30s, and now that we're extending here into the second week of April of what I do think is, going to be close to 60, maybe 90 days of what we've had here thus far. But I appreciate everybody listening out there. If you haven't done so already, check out the social media pages, GSMC Baseball. We got a Facebook page, a Twitter. Those two seem to get the most engagement out there. Instagram across the board. Twitter recently, we had some engagements with Pitching Ninja. I appreciate what he's doing for baseball, some of the content he's continuing to share. Hopefully we can do the same at GSMC. But if you're just joining us, first couple of segments, we talked about the MLB possibly playing in Japan. If not, they could totally disregard American and National Leagues and go Florida and Arizona Leagues, what those would look like, what the outcomes are. Some of those divisions are very intriguing, and I honestly wouldn't mind seeing it for a year play out that way. But our next couple of segments here, starting with segment 3, we've gone through the MVP, we've gone through the Cy Young, Rookie of the Year. What else have we done? I can't even remember here. But today, we're talking Manager of the Year. And we're going to start out in the National League, as we always do with these things. And last year, in 2019, it was a close race, actually, in both leagues. The top two were very close. There was a bit of a drop-off there to number 3. But in the National League, it came down to Mike Shildt for the St. Louis Cardinals and Craig Counsell for the Milwaukee Brewers, both out of the NL Central, garnering possibilities for this award. And the reason it was a little tricky here is because breaking down the votes, Craig Counsell finished second with 88 total votes or points, I guess we should say, but had the most first place votes. Actually went 13, 6, and 5 when it came to 1, 2, 3. And Mike Shildt, S-H-I-L-D-T, who actually won the award for the Cardinals with 95 total points, had 10 first-place votes. So 3 less first-place votes, but 8 more second-place votes than Counsell got. So out of Counsell's final 11, went 6-5. Out of 17 for Shildt, went 14-3. Ultimately won the total points there with less first-place votes. And I don't remember that, going back to 2019. I don't think we talked about that enough. And if you did here on the pod, that was before me. So very interesting to see that Manager of the Year in the NL got less first-place votes than Counsell, who ultimately finished second. But transitioning into 2020, giving you guys 3 names who I think have good odds, good potential. Then we have the usual suspects and then a long shot or two, similar to our Rookie of the Year breakdown. But some good odds out there. The top 3, number 1 I have is Joe Girardi. And yes, if you're listening, Kev, you're from Philadelphia, of course it's going to be Joe Girardi. But no, I think Joe Girardi nationally with what the Phillies have, if they, make the playoffs and put it together, Joe Girardi is going to be looked at as the reason why. He really is. He was the biggest addition for the Philadelphia Phillies this offseason. You could argue that Zach Wheeler was a quality addition, but I would argue with you that Girardi is a bigger addition and will have a larger effect on the outcome of the Phillies season this year than Zach Wheeler will going out every fifth day. So he took off a year last year, 2018, worked for MLB Network, was obviously with the New York Yankees for 10, 11 years before that, up until 2017, would probably still be with the Yankees, maybe would have won another World Series if we weren't banging trash cans back in 2017. I don't know. Just saying, I think he's one of the top managers in all of baseball. I think he was the biggest addition for the Phillies this offseason, and if they put it together and win 90 games or whatever that ratio turns out to be, either win that division or push Atlanta, Joe Girardi is going to be looked at as the biggest reason why, they're making that jump. Next up here at number 2, I have David Ross. Yes, he's a rookie manager, but I think that works in his favor. In this case, the Chicago Cubs, they've missed out on the postseason the last few years after winning the World Series in 2016. Pretty much the same cast of characters. Schwarber, Bryant, Baez, all of the same guys who were there. Rizzo in years past, and they just needed a new voice from Joe Maddon, so they go to a guy that they have played with who's now going to be their manager, which can be a tricky situation going from friend to superior that quickly for David Ross, but I think he has the talent, the charisma, and everything else that comes with being a major league manager, as well as having a catching background, as does Joe Girardi, a really excellent understanding and knowledge of the game and what you're trying to accomplish pitch by pitch. And if the Cubs put it together, make a run, win the NL Central, they didn't make a ton of additions. They're kind of looked at as possible sellers getting to the deadline. So if they're on the positive side, I think David Ross is going to get a ton of credit for what goes on in the Windy City. And then number 3, one of the most surprising realizations I had looking back at this was Davey Martinez, Washington Nationals manager, nowhere near manager of the year up at the top there. That's because the Nationals sucked for the first 2 months of the season, then turned it on and became one of the best teams in all of baseball from May through winning the World Series. And if they voted on this award after the playoffs, Martinez would have absolutely won the award. He was fantastic throughout the postseason. So I think there's going to be some residual effect that builds up from year to year where people go, shoot, maybe we should have voted for him last year and the job he did getting them to a wild card. If they're right back there this year in the wild card or at the top of the division, we certainly have to make up for our mistake last year and vote for him this year. So I think there's going to be a little bit of that leftover taste in voters, where they go, hey, if Washington's right there again, we better not screw this up another time. We better actually vote for Dave Martinez and get him the award that he deserved most likely last year. So the usual suspects that have been there in years past, Dave Roberts, LA Dodgers, top team in the NL years past, should be again. That's why it's tough for him to win the award. Brian Snitker in Atlanta. He won it a couple years ago, finished third last year, so he's right there again. Atlanta should win 100 games. There's no, real surprise going on down there. Craig Counsell finished second, the most first-place votes. If that Milwaukee Brewers team with the roster I basically laid out when I was making my predictions a few weeks back runs out and wins that Central Division, that's going to be another reason to look at Craig, that he's getting the best out of everybody and, should be favored to be at the top there. And then the 2 long shots I have, number 1, David Bell with the Cincinnati Reds. I called out Cincinnati being the surprise team in the NL Central for myself this year. So if that's the case, obviously David's going to get a lot of, accolades or recognition for the job that he's doing there, as well as Jace Tinger, San Diego Padres. They added Eric Hosmer a few years ago. Then they add Manny Machado. You combine that with Tatis Jr. and some of the other kids they got coming up here, and eventually San Diego's going to need to put it together. Well, if Tinger can do it out there, and they can make a run in the West, stay within striking distance of the Dodgers, maybe make a push for the playoffs, you're looking at a potential manager of the year candidate right there. So, in my eyes, Joe Girardi, Martinez, Ross, your best bets. You got the usual suspects, Snitker in Atlanta, Roberts out in L.A., and then the long shots, David Bell and Tinger, out in San Diego. But no odds up there yet if you're looking to make some money at the casino. I'm just saying keep an eye on some of those individuals, and if they start out with high odds, you may want to jump on board. Joe Girardi with the Phillies. If the Phillies make a push, that's going to be a slam dunk. But that wraps it up Another segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Kevin Mahalik. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows here within the network. When we come back on the flip side, we're going to talk AL Manager of the Year here in 2020.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, this is episode 179. If you've been with us since number 1, I appreciate it because I've only joined since number 165, 167. I don't know exactly when it was. I've been on, with GSMC here for about a month now, and it's been excellent, a whole lot of fun. I appreciate everybody out there who's been listening to the podcast, who's interacted with us on Twitter, who's liked the page on Facebook. You guys are the best out there. Leave us a comment, DM us wherever it may be with whatever you want to talk about, discussions, something I said on the pod upset you, you disagreed with something I said, well, let me know. Let's go back and forth. I'll give you some airtime if you make a nice point or if you have a question. I'll read it here on the show. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss it no matter the team, no matter the situation, whatever it may be. Hit us up via social media. We'd love to get you guys involved, get you some airtime here on the show. So if you're just joining us now, last segment I talked about the NL Manager of the Year candidates last year. Let's see here. Schilt won it for the Cardinals over Council. How it was a tight battle, 1-2. Well, a very similar situation in the American League. The top two individuals way ahead of everybody else, and that was Rocco Baldelli ultimately winning the award. He got 13 first-place votes. That's the same amount that Aaron Boone for the New York Yankees got, finishing in second place. The difference there was actually with the 2-3 votes. Rocco went 13 and 2. So obviously the majority felt that he was either first or second. Then Aaron Boone went 13, 9, and 4. So those two individuals that put Boone third instead of second cost him those points. And Rocco Baldelli won the award for the Minnesota Twins, who won the American League Central instead of the Cleveland Indians for the first time in a number of years there. And Rocco did an excellent job because I know individuals who played for Paul Molitor and know what kind of player he was, just had trouble managing at the big league level, specifically within the bullpen usage. And just, it was frustrating for more than one individual out there, with what was going on. So Rocco comes in, stabilizes everything, wins the division, and that puts him certainly in the mix once again this year. So similar to the National League, I'll give you guys kind of my top 3 who I believe are good odds, maybe not the best bets or the top bets, but certainly if their team puts it together, are going to be in the conversation and going to be hard to ignore when you come down the stretch. And number 1 is Joe Maddon. Joe Maddon comes over to the LA Angels from the Chicago Cubs. He is basically back home. He was in Tampa Bay, then Chicago. Now he's with the Angels, where he played as a player for years and spent years in the front office there before getting his shot in Tampa Bay. So he's at home out in L.A. Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, Albert Pujols, you name it. They got studs out there in L.A. And if Joe Maddon can come in here and push the right buttons in the clubhouse and get this team to make the postseason, we've talked about it at length. Maybe not at length, but we've mentioned it more than once. Mike Trout only has one playoff appearance, getting swept in 3 games, and I believe he was 1 for 12 in those games. So if Joe Maddon is the reason Mike Trout can get to playoff baseball and postseason baseball, it's almost a slam dunk for him to win the award, even if they're not even winning the division and they're getting in as a wild card. Maybe they make a run. That's where I think he is certainly at the top with his prestige, winning in Chicago, being the guy to bring it home for the first time in however many years, 86 years. It's just, Joe's going to get a shot to get back to the top of the mountain sooner than later. And speaking of getting back to the top of the mountain, this next guy, Dusty Baker, Houston Astros. Everybody knows what the storyline was supposed to be this offseason and coming into 2020 with Houston, the cheating, the scandal, all of the above. Obviously, the coronavirus has come in and become the new storyline. So if Dusty can navigate through the cheating scandal and still get Houston to play at a top level, win 100-plus games, still a loaded roster, it's going to be fun to watch. Dusty's last hurrah, obviously, in Washington, didn't get it done for years and years. Now Dave Martinez comes in here and does get it done. So, a bit of a smudge for Dusty there. But he's the right guy to lead Houston. He's like a father figure. He'll come in. He'll settle down that clubhouse. He'll get them to play the right way. He won't allow that type of quote-unquote culture to continue to mitigate itself down there in Houston. So Dusty Baker at the top of the list, Joe Maddon at the top of the list. The third gentleman I have is Kevin Cash for the Tampa Bay Rays. He actually finished third with 33 total points last year. So if they can take down the Yankees, win the AL East, obviously it would be a no-brainer in my opinion. Kevin Cash getting the job done. I just think he's one of the top managers in all of baseball, so I put him in here as good value because even if the Rays don't win the AL East, I think there's a very solid chance they can see themselves in postseason baseball, which means that, the manager's pushing all the right buttons again because they're not as deep or as talented on paper or as known, I guess I should say, as the Yankees, but certainly a solid ball club down there in Tampa Bay. The usual suspects, everybody knows out there, Aaron Boone, New York Yankees, should be the top team in the American League. They must win 100-some games, dealing with injuries here. If Boone can, right the ship, get him to the top of the list, he'll be right there once again, just like 2019. Rocco Baldelli, Minnesota Twins, win the AL Central, lose some, bring on Josh Donaldson, are going to be right there once again, favored potentially to win the AL Central once again. Once you're at the top, it's hard to stay there. So if they put together another solid season, another 100-plus win campaign, Rocco Baldelli is going to be in the conversation for Manager of the Year. And then the third guy I have in that list is Terry Francona. I touched on Rocco Baldelli. They got it done because they unseated the Indians for the first time in years and years. Well, if Terry Francona has his way and he can get Cleveland back to the top of the division, back into postseason play, back to where he had them of years past, it's going to be another heck of a job from Terry, and he's going to need to be respected and talked about for Manager of the Year, having that type of conversation. Those are the three biggest and most well-known names as well in the American League. The two long shots I have for everybody listening out there. First up, I have Bob Melvin out in Oakland. Everybody knows Oakland. Everybody knows Moneyball. Not a lot of talent, or I guess not a lot of money thrown into that ball club. A ton of talent all around, and Bob Melvin continues to push all the right buttons because they continue to be right there come playoff time, if not in the postseason, for the last 5 to 10 years, year after year, even with turnover on that team. So those of you who follow closely out there to the A's are obviously much higher on Melvin than us here on the East Coast, who maybe aren't tuning into that West Coast 10:30 first pitch between Oakland and the Seattle Mariners, who aren't very good either. But my last long shot is Rick Renteria, I believe it is, for the Chicago White Sox. Sorry, I couldn't read my own handwriting here on my notes. That's live podcasting here coming up on midnight Eastern night. But Rick Renteria for the Chicago White Sox, I keep touching on how this team is the future and a dynasty in the making. And if they come a year early, that's going to be a big shot for the manager. A big feather in his cap trying to get back to the top of the list here. So the top three good value bets: Joe Madden, Dusty Baker, Kevin Cash. You got your usual suspects: Aaron Boone, Rocco Baldelli, Terry Francona, and then your long shots: Rick Renteria, Bob Melvin. So keep an eye out here as, we start to figure out what the heck the MLB is going to do. Based on our first segment, could be over in Japan. Based on our second segment, could be Florida versus Arizona instead of American and National League. But either way, we may not have an NL and AL manager of the year. Maybe it's Florida and Arizona. I'd have to rearrange the list and figure out where everybody would fill if that's the case here. But just kind of staying status quo. I'll throw it out there. I think Dusty Baker may win the award if Houston puts it together. If not, Joe Madden's a solid bet for the American League winner, because I think the Angels finally make a run and finally make the postseason here in 2020. But that wraps up the fourth segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, I appreciate everybody listening out there. If you haven't done so already, check us out on social media, Twitter, Facebook. Follow us, comment, DM. We'll get you some love here on the podcast. But right now we're going to pause for a word from one of our sister shows here within the network. And then coming back here on segment number 5, we're going to discuss some of the differences between the Stratomatic and Baseball Reference simulations that are currently taking place. Let's see where they agree and disagree. So hang with us here for just a second. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, here it is Monday, April 13th, the day after Easter, if you're into celebrating that. If not, it's Monday the 13th. Lucky 13, unlucky 13. I myself, born on a Friday the 13th. If you ask people around me, that explains a little bit about me, but if not, that makes it my lucky number. So I'm enjoying the 13th of the month here as we continue on our quarantine, on our stay-at-home orders. If you're just joining the show here today, I appreciate you tuning in. Follow us on all the social media pages. We've had a great show thus far. We talked AL, NL Manager of the Year. We talked about the two most recent reports for Major League Baseball getting back on the field, whether that's in Japan or the Florida and Arizona leagues, whatever it may be. Well, now that we're into segment 5 here, I think it's time to discuss the update on the simulations that are currently taking place for the 2020 season. However, we're actually going to add a second simulation that I found now to reference. One of them that we've done here in the past by Stratomatic. We'll continue to reference that as we move forward. But I did find that Baseball Reference is using Out of the Park Baseball 21 to simulate the 2020 season. And I figured it'd be a little bit more effective with our time to kind of compare and contrast, to see what, two different supercomputers think about the same team, and if anything really jumps out in regards to a difference on what's been happening so far. So starting out team-wise in the AL East, Stratomatic, they're going Tampa Bay at 12-4, Boston 10-7, the Yankees 9-7, Baltimore 7-9, and Toronto 6-10. Baseball Reference right there with them, 6-10, 7-9 for Toronto and Baltimore, but a little bit of a difference when it comes to the Rays. Tampa at 12-4 with Stratomatic. Here at Baseball Reference, only 7-9. So early on, Tampa not having the same success for Baseball Reference. So that shows kind of where, again, they're not loaded, and New York is kind of finding their way, 10-6, 9-7. They will continue to plug along, and they'll be right where they need to be at the end of the season. The American League Central, some discrepancies here, and one, Stratomatic. I'm kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm buying this here. Kansas City 11-4, Cleveland 11-6, and then Minnesota at 7-9, Detroit and Chicago. The White Sox even at 4-11. Well, Baseball Reference is kind of more with me when it comes to the White Sox. They got the White Sox surprising early at 11-4. They have Cleveland as well at 11-6. So maybe I'm a little bit low on the Indians based on both of these. The Twins at 5-11. Wow, they really have the Twins falling back. They have Minnesota at 7-9. I don't think the computers like their pitching early on here when it comes to some of the matchups that will be happening. But, the Twins fans, Minnesota would not be pleased early on here. So Cleveland seems to both be getting positive. Chicago, that's the type of team they have. They literally could be 4-11 or they could be 11-4. It depends on these kids, how they continue to develop, how these arms perform, right from the jump here early in the season, wherever that may be. It'll be interesting to watch in Chicago on the American League side. The AL West, let's see, Oakland 11-5. They have them at 12-4 with Baseball Reference. Houston 9-6, 8-7 for Texas, the Rangers, and then Seattle at 5-12. Seattle's hanging in here with Baseball Reference, 10-7. Houston at 8-7, 500 kind of out of the gate. They have them at 9-6, so only a one-game difference early on. But the Oakland Athletics getting love here from both computer programs the first couple of weeks of the season. Very interesting to see if Oakland will be able to put it together. And, Bob Melvin, who I mentioned in the American League Manager Talk, could get some more chatter. Transitioning over to the NL East, Washington 10-5. The only team over 500, 8-9 for the Atlanta Braves. In Stratomatic, the Phillies 6-10. Looking at the Baseball Reference here, the Braves 11-6. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking here. I don't see Atlanta stumbling that much at 8-9. Miami at 10-7 for Baseball Reference is certainly a surprise. And then the Philadelphia Phillies at 3-13, the worst team in baseball. Ooh, I don't think they're the worst team in baseball. I certainly don't think they're the best team in baseball. 6-10, in my opinion, was a little bit low too. They really don't think that pitching staff's going to be able to do anything in the NL East there. And the locals in Philly would be going bananas if that certainly were the case. Let's see. National League Central, Chicago Cubs on Stratomatic continue the hot start, 11-5. St. Louis 9-7, Pittsburgh 9-7, Milwaukee, Cincinnati 7-8. Everybody within 3.5 games. Transition over to Baseball Reference, not as high on the Cubs. That's one way off here. 11-5 to 6-10. The Cubbies. I think I see them more at 6-10 than I do 11-5. If you're telling me those are the two options right now that you're giving me, the Cardinals 11-5, the Reds 10-5. See, Baseball Reference is high on the Reds, just like I was, and then the Pirates and Brewers 9-7, 8-7. Solid, comparisons here, exactly where they are. Across both feeds. So the Cubs really hit or miss. I think the Reds make a push. So I think Reference is a little bit more of what we're looking at in terms of correctness here. And then lastly, the NL West, San Diego 12-4 with Stratomatic, Arizona, LA at 8-8. What's going on there? Let's see. Baseball Reference, LA 11-5. Yeah, that seems a bit more likely than 8-8 for the best team in the National League. The Arizona Diamondbacks 11-6, and then they have the Padres at 5-11. So Stratomatic high on San Diego, Baseball Reference not so much. And my overall gut, my first instinct here, is to care a little bit more about what Baseball Reference is saying. And maybe it's because they're agreeing with me a little bit more than Stratomatic. But certainly be interesting to see if this does occur. But transitioning into some individual statistics and individual performances that are taking place in these simulations here. Let's start at the plate. Stratomatic. They got Manny Machado lighting it up. 435, hitting 435, which is obviously why they're at the top of the division. Jimenez for the Chicago White Sox at 433. Nelson Cruz, 418. Lopez for Kansas City at 414. And Blackman at 400. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys still hitting over 400 in the Stratomatic simulation. Let me get over here to Baseball Reference, see if I can get a batting average. How many guys? Only 3 guys. We got Dahl from Colorado, Andujar from the Yankees. He's hitting 404, Miguel Andujar, and then that rounds out with, there goes Santander. Anthony Santander for Baltimore hitting 400. That'd be good for them. Let's go over to home runs, see if we can find home runs here. Jimenez for the White Sox with 8, Trevor Story with 8, Springer with 7, Soler with 7, Hiura with 7, Devers with 7. With Baseball Reference, we got a 9. We got a leader, Reyes in Cleveland with 9. Simeon, 8 out in Oakland. Upton, Stanton, Davis, Gallo, and Alvarez in Houston all have 7. So 8 seems to be the pace currently for individuals. Let's transition over to the mound real quick here. Stratomatic, looking at ERA. Snell down in Tampa, 0.48. Strasburg in Washington, 0.88 early on. Lopez in Minnesota, 0.9. Shoemaker in Toronto, 1. So that's a few guys under 1. Here with Baseball Reference, we only got 2 guys. We got Freeland from Colorado, and then Bryce Wilson, an early surprise at 0.95 in the ERA column. With wins, a lot of people have 3 early on for the lead here. Keller in Kansas City for Stratomatic has 4, so that makes him setting the pace here as well. But that was fun. I enjoyed doing that for you guys, the listeners out there, kind of figuring out which teams are going back and forth. Very interesting to see the differences that they have, whether it was the White Sox, even the Astros. I forget some of the other ones off the top of my head here, but it'll be curious because, again, the White Sox, they could be really good, or they certainly could be really, really bad. But that wraps up the 5th segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows here within the network, but then we're going to finish up today's episode with an excellent segment. I've talked about home run derbies in the past. Well, now I'm going to get into who I think would represent every team in the home run derby. I'm thinking, because we're watching the NBA play horse here on Easter night, Sunday night, I'm thinking we could get a home run derby March Madness thing going here. So hang with me. I'm going to give you guys some names. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the 6th and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate everybody listening out there today. If you've made it this far, do me a favor, scroll down on your Apple Podcast feed, click the 5-star review. The more reviews, that helps us spread the word within iTunes, within Apple Podcasts. If you're on Spotify, Rate us, give us a comment. I'll read them here on the air. As you guys heard earlier today, we had a shout out from somebody in the Pittsburgh area. Loved our PNC Park takes, whether it was the food or just the ballpark in general. So if you guys could do that, it really helps us. Facebook, we have a page out there, GSMC baseball page. We're continuing to gather fans, and we'll spread more and more content that you guys will find relevant. But this is the sixth and final segment. If you've made it this far, I appreciate it. We've talked about AL and NL managers of the year, baseball in Japan, Florida-Arizona leagues. We had it all, the simulation, what the heck's going on out there. But I'm wrapping it up with what I think is one of the best segments and one of the best conversations that we're going to continue to have here over the next couple of weeks, and that is around the Home Run Derby. First of all, I brought it up a couple of times. First time was the extra inning rule, where if you play 11 innings or 12 innings, you now have a swing-off Home Run Derby style, 3 swings, 5 swings, 30 seconds, if that's how you want to do it, if you want to time it, because that seems to have gone well for the Home Run Derby style. I think I would love to see Bryce Harper and Pete Alonso go at it 5 swings apiece, because we just played 13 innings of baseball and we don't have, a victory yet. That way I'm not seeing position players pitch. It eliminates that conversation. It would just do wonders. You're sitting in the stands. Hey, we're going to the 12th inning. Well, let's stick around, because after this inning, there's the Home Run Derby swing off. So even if they don't win it, I want to hang around for that. And that way we know when the ending is specifically, and not, well, they could play 24 innings. They could be here till tomorrow. It's just frustrating from a fan perspective. That would bring a lot of jump and a lot of energy back to the game. And then secondly, the NBA is playing horse on ESPN tonight as I'm recording this late Sunday night, watching, who was it, Chauncey Billups and Trae Young going at it in a game of horse. Well, can't we get a Home Run Derby thing going here? You got one pitcher, one hitter, one guy on the camera, one guy reporting, second guy on the camera. If you really want to get extravagant, that's 5 individuals that would need it to be, there to record this. You get Bryce Harper, his old man, give him 2 minutes. We're going bracket style. I'm thinking I'm onto something here. I'm thinking we're going to try to tag Major League Baseball, ESPN. Let's see if we can get the ball rolling on this here over the next couple of weeks. You guys can help me out by doing that on Twitter, social media, letting them know, hey, I heard this great idea. Let's get this rolling. But I'm going to go through basically all 30 teams and read off who I think their representative should be in this Home Run Derby style of March Madness and or, end of game extra inning Home Run Derby winner. I'm going to somehow figure out how to put these guys in a bracket and discuss what I believe would happen over the next, show or two here, because I think it's quality conversation. But starting off, NL East, Atlanta, you got to go Ronald Acuna Jr. or Freddie Freeman. Who's ever swinging a hot bat at the time, probably Acuna would be better in this spot. I know Freeman's not a big home run guy. We saw him in the Derby, but in BP he tends to, think up the middle the other way. Miami Marlins, Jesus Aguilar, big boy. He can hit it a long way. He'd win more of these than I think that would deserve the Marlins overall as a team. The Mets, Pete Alonso, Rookie of the Year. We talked about him. The Phillies, going Bryce Harper. If he's really, really in a funk, maybe Rhys Hoskins steps in there. He's done the Derby in the past. Very little effort, hit the ball a long way. Washington Nationals have to go Juan Soto. Ooh, electric. He can hit the ball a mile. We saw that in the playoffs last year. He's only getting better. I think he's, 19, 20 years old now by this point. So NL Central, Chicago Cubs, Schwarber, Baez, Rizzo, all the options they got. It'd be kind of an extra element for the manager too. Hey, who's hot? Who's shooting? NHL shootout style. Who am I letting shoot here? Well, who's hot? Who's seeing the ball well? Is it Schwarber? Is he popping everything up? Maybe we'll go Baez. The Reds got to go Suarez. In my opinion, the Brewers go Yelich, even though he's more of a doubles guy. The Pirates run Josh Bell out there. He had a hell of a first half in 2019. Paul Goldschmidt for the St. Louis Cardinals. Ooh, man, that could be a lot of fun, watching Josh Bell and Goldschmidt go at it to end an NL Central game. NL West, Diamondbacks, they didn't have great options, but Eduardo Escobar, he can pop it, so he'd be a solid pick. The Rockies, Corey Blackman, but I think it's Nolan Arenado. The Dodgers, this is another one. Who the heck are you running out there? Dave Roberts, LA Dodgers. Is it Bellinger? Is it Peterson? Is it Muncy? Is it Mookie Betts? Is it, the list goes on. And that's where, again, it would be, what night is tonight? Oh, is Bellinger 0 for 6 and Peterson's 4 for 6? Run Peterson out there. Mookie Betts is seeing the ball well, 2 doubles, another hard line out. Maybe we'll give Mookie the opportunity to pop him here. That could be a lot of fun. San Diego Padres, you think Hosmer, Manny Machado, Tatis Jr., if he's really stepped into his own this year, that would be a solid option for them. San Francisco Giants, Evan Longoria, God, who else is out there? Bolts, yeah, I don't know. The Giants are not going to be very good. That's where I'm at right now when it comes to the San Francisco Giants. Going over to the American League, the Orioles, Renato Nunez, he hit over 30 last year, I think 31 for the Orioles, and obviously a down year. It surprised me when I was looking at their options. I think he would probably steal a game or two against one of these individuals. If you're the Red Sox, you're running out J.D. Martinez with the way their roster's currently made. If you're the Yankees, another team with options, another team that would have to decide who it is. Giancarlo Stanton, is it Aaron Judge? Is it Gleyber Torres? Is it Sanchez behind the dish? That's 4 options right there. And there's others too, that could make an argument depending on, how their year is going at that particular time. So, you run the wrong guy out there. He throws up a 0, doesn't win. Man, you should have went with Stanton. I can't believe you went with Judge. It can be an extra conversation that we could eat up here in the media. Tampa Bay either goes Renfroe or Meadows. Probably Meadows in my opinion. Blue Jays, Vlad Guerrero Jr. We saw him last year in the Home Run Derby. Not somebody you want to be going up against in a contest like this. That's for sure. The White Sox run Encarnacion out there now, Edwin Encarnacion. Also have Jose Abreu as an option. The Indians, Franmil Reyes, he can pop them. Carlos Santana potentially, but I think Reyes is the guy. The Tigers, oh man, they're like the Giants, but Jonathan Schoop, he would probably be the best bet for Detroit. The Royals can run out Jorge Soler. He crushes the baseball. The Twins, Nelson Cruz, Josh Donaldson, Max Kepler. Who else do they have? The Bombers out there in Minnesota. Pick your poison. That would be a lot of fun. And then rounding out the AL West, the Astros, they probably go Yordan Alvarez over the likes of Bregman, potentially even George Springer. But true power-wise, Yordan Alvarez is certainly the way to go. The Angels, Mike Trout, he's the no-brainer. I know Shohei Ohtani has light tower power, but Mike Trout would be the move. The Athletics, Chris Davis, Matt Olson, righty-lefty. Which ballpark are you in? That could play into a decision here. Which way do they go? The Mariners, Kyle Seager, and then the Rangers, Joey Gallo. Obviously, Joey is, the quintessential 2020 baseball player, hits 200 but has 50-some home runs, 100 RBIs, and singles or dingers, for Joey Gallo. But I'm going to figure out how to put these 30 names into a bracket and then either run a simulation on a video game or on the computer. I'm going to figure out how to put something together here to see ultimately who would win a March Madness-style home run derby. Kind of playoff between all these contestants. But, I mean, come on. Just think about it. Astros, Angels, extra innings. We're getting Alvarez, Trout, home run derby to see who wins the game after 12 innings because at this point, hey, just come back tomorrow. Our bullpens are spent. I'm all for it. I know you're all for it. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate y'all listening today here, Monday, April 13th, if you're listening the day of release. If not, if it's that week, you're catching up here. I appreciate it. Give us 5 stars, like, rate, review the podcast. Also, check us out on social media, as always. That goes a long way. Whatever you're into, GSMC, they got a podcast for you out there. News, politics, sports, baseball, you name it. They got something for you. But I appreciate y'all listening once again. Thank you from the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Kevin Mahalik. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a great rest of your night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.